What is up, my favorite people? I hope you guys are doing amazing. This is Coach Chad, the CEO of the Next Level Coaching Academy and the creator of the Assistant Coach Academy. I hope you guys are doing flipping amazing. It is Tuesday. It is 6 o'clock at night. If you're watching this in video format, the quality is terrible, absolutely terrible, because it's dark. But the quality of this content is going to be absolutely freaking amazing. All right. So what we're going to be talking about today is I'm going to help you guys self-diagnose your business. Now, I know that doesn't sound sexy, but I promise the advice I'm about to give in this podcast is literally 8-figure advice. Like literally the shit that is going to get your business from 5 figures to 6 figures, 6 figures to 7 figures, 7 figures to 8 figures, 8 figures to 9 figures, every step of the way. Like you can literally use this framework every freaking step of the way throughout your whole entire business. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you exactly what numbers you need to be tracking, like what data should be important to you as a business owner and CEO. And then I'll tell you exactly how to read that data and self-diagnose yourself with a problem that needs to be fixed. Okay, so I can't take 100% credit for this framework. My personal business coach, his name is Cole Gordon, constructed this framework, and then I kind of made it my own relevant to fitness coaching. I added a couple little keys to it, but it's been a framework that's been extremely, extremely helpful for me, and I want to pass this framework down to y'all so that you guys can use this as well. It's also a very similar framework to one that we use. So I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent that's not relevant, but let's do it. So in our mastery program, it's a very high level mastermind for coaches that are already a little bit more established. They're probably making right around $10,000 a month, and they really want to scale to 50,000 plus a month. We even have some students that are in the 6-figure a month range, meaning they have to make $100,000 a month. And this is the framework that we take them through in the beginning. So every single one of our mastery students get, in our apprenticeship students actually get what's called a game planning call, which is actually a 30-minute call right in the beginning of when they're onboarded into the program, where we basically break down their business and then say, hey, this is what we need to do to essentially solve your problem and grow your business. So this is the framework that we actually take our mastery students through. There was one other thing I was going to say before I dove in. Oh yeah, I'm officially out of sales calls. It took me a hot minute. Maybe I should do a whole podcast on that. Not right now, but maybe my next podcast will be about that. But literally, it was a great reminder for me, honestly. My biggest takeaway from that was it was a great reminder that business is not as stable as we think, meaning of course, revenue could be stable, expenses could be stable, things of that nature, but your business is very, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's been a long day and I've recorded a lot of videos for the course, but what I'm saying is essentially there's nothing guaranteed in business, right? You can lose one staff member and your whole entire business can change like that. And that was a great reminder for me, because for the entirety of 2021, things were going pretty stable. And then boom, I had to fire that staff member. I had to step into taking calls, and I took calls November, December, and pretty much most of January. So almost damn near 3 months, I was taking sales calls. So great reminder. I'm excited to be out of sales calls. I'm excited to grow the business again. I mean, obviously the business grew because I was taking sales calls, and I'm pretty good at it. But I'm excited to focus on projects that are going to move the business forward. One of the next big ones that we're going to be really focusing on is we completely improved our mastery program, which I'm very, very excited about. But the one that I'm very excited about this year is we're going to focus heavily on growing the Assistant Coach Academy. And I think that offer is so unique. There's nobody else in the space that helps assistant coaches learn how to be good assistant coaches and also get hired. It's a very unique offer that I'm excited to dive full force into. Now, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm relatively pretty good at it. So let me start rambling about something that actually provides you guys with some value. Okay. So like I said, the purpose of this podcast here is I'm going to tell you exactly what numbers should be important to you as a business owner and how to look at those numbers and understand what your particular problem is that you need to solve. All right, so let's run through the numbers very quickly. The first one is ad spend. How much am I spending on ads? And if that number is 0, then write 0, right? That is totally fine. Like I said, this is a framework that you can use throughout each step of your journey. And if that number is 0 for now, that's fine. I would continue to, I would continue every time you go through this framework, I would continue to write down that number, even if it is 0, because eventually it won't be 0. Okay. The next thing that should be important to you is availability, meaning how many sales calls can you take in a month? All right. So what is that number? What is your availability? So if you could take 5 calls a day, 6 days a week, that's 30 calls. 30 times 4 is 120. So now you have 120 slots that you could fill within a month. The very next thing that you need to figure out is scheduled consults, meaning how many calls are you booking within a month? Why is that important? The reason that's important is because I have no idea what's going on in the kitchen, but I hear a lot of things falling, and it's starting to make me a little nervous for when I'm done with this podcast. So scheduled consults, you want to look at scheduled consults relevant to your availability. If you are booking more calls than you have available on your calendar, that is a problem. That means you need to hire somebody to help you take more calls. Okay. So I know we haven't dove into potential problems yet, but I just felt the need to say that. So far, you have ad spend, you have availability, meaning how many calls you can take in a month, how many calls you're scheduling in a month. The next thing you want to write down is you want to write down how many top of funnel channels you have. Where are the places that you're generating leads? Are you doing DMs on certain Instagrams or Facebooks? How many Instagrams? How many Facebooks? Are you running ads? Do you have a referral program? Do you have an affiliate program, right? Where are all the leads coming from? Write all that down. All right, the next thing you want to write down is what are your nurture channels, meaning of the leads that you have that haven't bought yet, where are they being nurtured? Is it a Facebook group? Is it an email list? Is it an SMS list, right? Write all those down. All right, the next metric you want to write down is your booked ratio. How many out of your scheduled consults, meaning how many out of your booked calls in a month come from ads versus come from organic? Okay, it could be 100% organic, right? That's totally fine. Just write down the metric. Okay, next thing we want to write down is we want to write down our show up percent, or how many calls showed. So out of the calls that we booked, how many of those actually showed up for their appointment? The next thing we want to write down is what is the percentage of that? What is our show percentage? All right, the next number that you want to write down is your offers. All right, so out of the calls that showed, how many did we actually pitch an offer? Meaning how many actually heard the price of your program? That's making an offer, right? And then what is our offer percentage? Offer percentage is you take a number of calls offered and divide it by the amount of calls shown, and that will give you your offer percentage. Okay, the next thing that you want to write down is how many out of those calls you offered did you actually close? How many became clients? The next thing you want to write down is your closing percentage. All right. So out of the calls that showed, not out of the calls that you offered, but out of the calls that showed, how many of those closed? What is that percentage? Okay. Next thing you want to write down is your price points. All right. So you want to write down the price points, the total price points, not the monthly price points, but the total package price points for each package that you offer. Okay. The next thing that you want to write down, I promise this may go on for an extra couple minutes. There's a lot of important numbers that you should look at in a business. And like I said, hopefully this is just providing some clarity on how to think about your business. The next thing that you want to write down here is available coach roster spots remaining. So if you have assistant coaches, how many remaining roster spots do you guys have? If you are the only coach, how many remaining roster spots do you have? Very, very important metric to track. This will determine when you need to hire your first assistant coach, and also when you need to hire your next assistant coach every time you hire one. All right, the next thing you want to track is your new contracted revenue, meaning how much in total contracts did you sign that month? All right, what does contracted mean? Contracted very simply means, what did the contract state? Did the contract state 3,000? Great, then you contracted 3,000. It's different than collected. Collected is how much of the contracted did you actually collect? All right, so new contracted revenue. The next data point is how much of that new contracted revenue came from ads. So if you contracted $50,000, $5,000 came from ads, then write $5,000 you got contracted from ads. All right, what is your contracted what is your return on ad spend contracted? Stick with me here. I promise you, I know this is getting confusing, but I promise you this is going to save your freaking life. All right. So contracted return on ad spend. How do we figure that out? You take your contracted revenue from ads and divide it by how much you spent on ads, and that will tell you your contracted return on ad spend. All right. The next thing you want to know is your collected return on ad spend. So very simply, take cash collected from ads. So how much of the contracted amount that you signed that month actually did you collect cash, like in the bank, hit the bank account from ads? All right. So you take that amount and you divide that by ad spend, and that will give you your collected return on ad spend. All right. The next metric that is very, very important is upfront cash collected. Okay. So I will do my best to explain this. Upfront cash collected. So if you contracted, let's say $10,000 this month, all right, and of that new $10,000 that you contracted, you actually collected 2,000 of that. That's your upfront cash collected. That does not include your reoccurring payments. Okay, so upfront cash collected is how much money did I bring in within that 30 days from my new contracted revenue, not including reoccurring payments. Okay, that number bare minimum should be 35%. So if once again I contracted $10,000 that month, the bare minimum that I want to collect from that new contracted would be 3,500, 35%. Okay, so that's the next number that you want to write down. All right, the next thing you want to write down is your re-sign rate. All right, so your re-sign rate is this. I had X amount of clients up this month, I re-signed X. I had 10 clients up this month, I re-signed 5. My re-sign rate is 50%, right? Re-sign rate. Okay, I will go over this. So like I said, these are all the important things that I, Chad, look at in the business. All right, so there's a couple more, and then we're going to go over the potential problems, and I'm going to help you pick which problem is yours based on all the numbers here. All right, so the next thing you want to know is your top of line revenue, which is all new money plus reoccurring money. All right, so if you use QuickBooks, this is your revenue essentially, right? So all new money brought in that month plus all reoccurring money equals top of line revenue. All right, then you want to know your bottom line. All right, so your bottom line is expenses, right? How much, what does QuickBooks tell you your expenses are? All right, the next thing I want to know there is I want to know my net operating profits. Okay, so net operating profit is money after expenses. All right, so how much money is left? How much money is left after expenses? Okay. Now, a couple more things I want to know, and I promise you that I know you're probably like, oh my God, Chad, it's the boringest podcast ever. I promise you, if you take this podcast seriously, you will grow much, much, much faster than you think. All right, so we just talked about net operating profit. So the next thing I want to do, or I want you to do, is I want you to break down your expenses. All right, so your expenses should be broken down into 3 categories: labor expenses, which is contractors and W-2 employees, so 1099s and W-2s. This should consist of about 60 to 70% of your total expenses. All right. Then we have marketing expenses. Marketing expenses are referrals, ads, things of that nature. That should equate for 20 to 35% of your total expenses. All right. Then you have overhead. Overhead is like softwares, apps, things of that nature. This should be your lowest. This should make up about 5 to 10% of your total expenses. Okay. Your overall margins, which is the last number you need to look at here, should be above 50%. In a perfect world, it should be between 55 and 70%. If your margins are below 50%, there's a big issue. You should definitely become an NLCA student, and we should definitely look into that. All right, so those are all the important numbers that you as the business owner should be paying attention to. Okay, now what do all these numbers mean? You know, what are potential constraints here? Okay, so constraint number 1, potential problem number 1, is probably the easiest to come by, which is you just need more leads. Your availability is good, your show is good, your close rate is good, your re-sign rate is good, your profit margins are good. You literally just need to get more people in the door. You need to get more people on the phone, and it's a very simple solution. All right. So one, you probably just need a messenger team. You probably don't have a messenger team at this point. You probably need to hire people to do the messaging for you. And you probably need to start running ads at this point if you're making at least $10,000 a month cash collected. If you are not, it's probably more about, oh, I'm either not spending enough time in the DMs, or my team isn't spending enough time in the DMs, or I need a team to spend more time in the DMs. All right, I'm not going to get too much into the solutions actually, because then if I get into the solutions here, this podcast will be turned into 2 hours. So I'm just going to describe each of these potential problems based on the numbers so that you can do a self-diagnosis on where you're at. All right. So number one is you need more leads. And like I said, what this looks like is after running through all those numbers, you have plenty of availability, both for taking sales calls and roster spots. Your show rate is good. Your close rate is good. A good show rate, I should also clarify, a good show rate is above 60%. If it's below 60%, it's probably something you need to look into. A good closing rate is above 40%. If it's below 40%, it's probably something you need to look into. A good re-sign rate is 50% or above. If it's below 50%, it's probably something you need to look into. And good profit margins, we already talked about, above 50%, ideally between 55 and 70%. All right. So if all those metrics are good, it's literally, hey, we need to find a way to get more leads in the door. Okay. Potential problem number two is your show rate. Okay. If your show rate is less than 60%, that is a problem. And you should go listen to my previous podcast that I literally did just before this that defines 10 things that you need to do to improve your show rates. All right, potential problem number three. If you're looking at your metrics and you see closing rate of below 40%, that tells me that you really need to work on your closing skill, or you need to work on managing your closing team. All right, so that's potential problem number three. Potential problem number four is your offer percentage. How many calls that show actually get an offer is less than 85%. If it's less than 85%, I view this as an indicator that the calls that are being booked is not good quality. You're not booking a good quality call. You have to focus on the calls that you have to focus on the quality of the call. And to me, that's your offer percentage would be above 85%. Okay, potential problem number five is your price point. If your price point is under industry standard, if we're talking pure fitness, like if I'm just talking purely to fitness coaches here, that looks like anywhere from like $250 a month to $400 a month. And that's dependent on the length of term. The longer the length of term, the less the monthly payment. And that offer traditionally looks like a custom workout plan, custom nutrition plan, a one-time a week check-in, and additional resources. All right, if your prices are below that, that potentially could be your problem, meaning you could be booking a ton of calls could be showing, a ton of calls could be closing, but you're nowhere near your revenue target because you're just not charging enough. Okay, so that potentially could be your problem. All right, the number six potential problem is your availability for coach roster spots, meaning you're like literally a week out from running out of roster spots. All right, so here's what you have to do. You have to do simple math. All right, this will help you determine when you need to hire your first assistant coach or your next assistant coach. You need to figure out how many clients you're signing per week. Very easy average to find. You need to figure out how many roster spots you have left, and you just need to do the division. So if you have 10 roster spots left and you're signing 2 clients a week, that means in the next 5 weeks, if retention stays relatively the same, or you don't have a lot of students up, in the next 5 weeks, you're going to be out of roster spots. And then if you don't do this math and you don't know these numbers, you're going to come to a place where it's like, oh shit, we need to hire an assistant coach. And then if that's your first time doing it, or even if it's not your first time doing it, it's at least a 4 to 6 week process. So just know that number, please. It's a very important number to know. All right, the seventh and final potential problem that could happen here is if your margins are less than 50%. All right, if your margins are less than 50%, you have to do a deep dive into your labor expenses, marketing expenses, and overhead expenses and see what the fuck is going on. It's probably, like I said, because labor expenses make up about 60 to 70%. of these types of online fitness businesses, it's probably that you're just paying somebody too much. That's likely, oh, here comes Mila. She's pushing the door. It's probably, like I said, that you're paying somebody too much. All right, so I'm going to wrap up this podcast really quick. Mila does have the door open. All right, but let's wrap up this podcast. All right. So what was the purpose behind this? The purpose behind this was to teach you guys what numbers are most important as a business owner. And then sorry, I gotta. Hey, Caleb. Yep. Can you shut that door? I'm literally mid podcast. This is all gonna be in the recording.
Oh, you don't want her in here?
No, she can be in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, I am super distracted and I really apologize. This is not my best performance. But all right, let's break it all down. So like I said, these are all the numbers that you guys need to know as a business owner. I would find a way to track these numbers on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, and a yearly basis. Once a month, I would do a self-assessment on these numbers. All right, and I would go back and on a sheet of paper, I would write down all 7 potential problems that I identified for you guys here. On a monthly basis, I would identify what my current problem is, and then I would construct a solution for that problem and make my sole focus that month attacking that problem. The next, oh, goodness gracious, the next month, I would do the same thing over and over again. And I would make this a monthly process. And this is how you can prepare. This is how, Mila. This is how you can, oh, goodness. Oh my God. This is a disaster. Okay. Let's try to end this again. So like I said, this should be a monthly process. This is how you should prepare for your next month. This is how you should look at, not only should you do this monthly, but you should look at these numbers weekly and see where your bottleneck is and solve that one bottleneck. If I've been doing business coaching for a while, and one of the things that I've noticed that students have a hard time focusing on just solving one problem. They want to solve all the problems, they want to do all the things, and their business grows very slowly because they're not directing their energy towards their biggest current bottleneck. This is a very simple framework for you to be able to identify your current biggest bottleneck and then find what it is and construct a solid solution to solve it so that you scale much quicker than anybody else. Let's freaking go. I hope you guys enjoy this. I know it was a bit of a mess, but hey, like I said, I'm all about being authentic and my true self. And I don't really like when my podcast guy cuts anything out. So all the flaws, you guys get to see all of it. I hope you guys appreciate that about me. And let's crush the rest of the week, and I'll see you guys on the next one.